Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of MovieCast. I guess we're calling it at this point, where we're going to be breaking down *Malignant*, which is shown on HBO Max and also in theaters. And I am joined by Mr. Chris Seeley. How are you doing, Mr. Seeley?
I'm doing great, thanks. I'm doing a lot better than the police station, I'll tell you that.
Mm, 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 mm. Indeed, I think we all are. We'll just kind of just dive into it. It's just him and I this time. Everyone kind of gave up on the movie, so that is an interesting story in itself. They just gave up and couldn't do it no more. So we're gonna just talk about it, going right off from the beginning. What were your thoughts? Was it positive? Was it negative? I have so many mixed emotions.
Yeah, I was up and down too. So the movie starts on like this shot of what looked like Notre Dame placed on the
Mhm.
edge of a of a coast, and I was like, "What the heck is this?" And it tells you it's a research hospital. I'm like, "That's the weirdest research hospital ever." I'm like, "It's a hospital out of an H.P. Lovecraft story." And they go into it, and this lady is giving I guess she's recording a session, and she's talking about some patient that's aggressive and everything, and then things go wrong. Somebody comes against her. They're freaking out. You go into a room, but you can't see what's happening in there, and somebody's bloody. Somebody gets thrown out, and the security guard he has this big briefcase with him. He opens it up, and this big rifle puts tranquilizers in it. I'm like, holy shit, you need that to for patients? Like you don't have like a baton or something? I mean, you're going right for the elephant gun to get like you're trying to tranquilize a tiger at the Bronx Zoo that got out. So I think somebody gets killed because
Mhm.
he sees somebody hit the door and they're bloody, and then so the doctor's like, "Oh yeah, go in there." If I was him, I would have been like, "Nope, peace out. You're not paying me enough for that." I would have left as soon as I saw that. But he sticks the rifle in the door, and then there goes his arm. Like the rifle's gone, and his arm gets broken, like broken. Like he pulls it out, and you see the bone and everything,
Mhm.
and you're like, Jesus Christ, what kind of like Jason Voorhees character they got in that room? And then so the doctor takes the gun, and you go in, and they do a good job. They hide who's doing all of this. You just see bodies everywhere. She goes in the room. There's people splayed all over the place. There's blood everywhere. And then she shoots something. You hear screaming, but it doesn't
Yep.
quite sound human.
Yep.
And then she orders some guys, some more orderlies come in to restrain whatever it is, and they drag it into another room. And you see feet. You see normal feet with little socks, right? And it's like, is this a kid? And they go behind this plastic drapery, and the plastic's like opaque, so you can't really see through it.
Mhm.
But what's on the other side doesn't look quite human. And she's, so well, we have to cut out the cancer or something like, you don't know what's happening. You see a screeching thing on the other side of the plastic, and she says that, and then the movie starts, and they do the comic book thing where you see like lots of stuff in the credits, medical files. Like Loki did the same thing. I
Mhm.
guess that's the thing now with the credits. It's like they give you clues in the intro, and you see files and pictures and I don't know, science stuff and cells, and I don't know. You see all this shit, and I mean the movie's called *Malignant*, so it has something to do with cancer, but
Right. Or
it's
tumor.
tumors, and you don't know what's quite happened in
No.
the there, and then it jumps to the present, right? That was the
Like
90s when the
29.
thing in the hospital jumps to the present day, and you see this woman, and she comes home. You can't tell what is happening except she's holding her belly, so you assume she's pregnant.
Yeah.
Goes in the house, and I guess her husband's there, and he's watching UFC on TV, and she's like, "Oh, I have a headache or whatever," and they get into a fight, and like a douchebag, he rams her head in the wall, and you tell he's abusive. Goes to get ice, she locks the door, and then later it jumps to that she locks herself in the room, jumps to night. He's sleeping on the couch. Then he hears a noise. The things are turning on in the house. Like the blender turns on, he turns it off.
Mhm.
Uh, then the TV turns on, and he sees something on the couch, but then he turns on the light and the dude that jumps, it's not nothing there, right? Except he sees a couch cushion move, and he's like, oh, so he's looking around, and then I don't know. It looks like the grudge got him, right? Like that's what
Yeah,
it looked
that
like
was
to
the
me.
grudge.
Yeah. Then the lady from who got that he his wife, he hit her head on the wall. She wakes up and her pillow's all bloody. So that part I had a problem with because I'm like, okay, he injured you really badly. Your skull is bleeding, but you didn't go get help or do anything to treat it. Like I know she
Abusive
locked herself in the room.
relationship.
Yeah,
Right.
she didn't like wash her head or bandage, and she was dressed kind of like a nurse or something. So I thought maybe she was a nurse or something. So you'd have gauze, or she go, screw it, let me climb out the window. I don't want to go near him, and I'll go get help. But no, she just goes to sleep with her broken skull.
I
And
mean, we end up knowing why she does that.
huh?
We know why she technically
Well,
doesn't.
we know why later, but we
Well, yeah,
don't know
later.
then. It didn't make sense
Right.
if you just then. And then so she goes downstairs and she finds him, and his head is twisted backwards. Like he is snapped. It's like Thanos broke his neck, right? It looks like that. But you see it, like you see him, and
Hmm.
then it she sees like a black figure, and it's like crawling around, and that's where I get the Grudge reference from. She's kind of crawling around like the chick from the Grudge on the floor, and so she freaks out and she runs back upstairs, and she tries to bar the door to the bedroom again, but doesn't work. The thing is like trying to bust in, and then the door blows open, busts the door, throws her back in the room, and she gets knocked out.
Yes.
Then we're in the hospital, and she wakes up. She's like, "Oh my god!" And then there's another woman with her that we find out later is her sister. And she's like, "Oh, you all right?" And then she realizes that she's not pregnant anymore, and you get that the sisters like they couldn't save the baby, so she lost it in the whole incident. And then we meet the fine detectives from the Seattle Police Department. You get the typical good cop, bad cop, except the bad cop, is this black woman who is very cynical.
Hmm.
She's funny, but at the same time, like very serious, and very very cynical. And they go in the house, they find the husband, um, and they're like, "Oh, it's a home invasion, but there's no forced entry." So like, "Oh, it's mysterious." And the coroner's like, "Oh, we might see this in like a vehicular accident." And he said, we can't find the. But she said they couldn't find the top half of his head, and I was like,
Hmm.
I don't remember when they showed him that part of his head was missing, but
It
part of
was
his
so
head was
weird,
missing.
twisted. You could tell, like it looked something was either caved in or
Yeah, yeah. I
knocked
thought his head was
away.
just caved in, but yeah, it said that they couldn't find it. And the coroner obviously likes the detective. They kind of established that she, so in that awkward scene where they're looking at a murder scene, she's kind of hinted that she's got the hots for the male detective character, but he's aloof, and he's not really interested in her. Um, but yeah, so that beginning scene kind of sets up the movie, and so it's the first 20 minutes. So the first 20 minutes you have this establishing thing at the hospital, time jump from 93 to the present day. Then you get the first murder is this lady's husband who's abusive. He's now dead, and then this entity or whatever that's in this woman's house. And you're like, oh, well, how does this relate? How does this connect? It's kind of weird because I'm like, how does this relate to the hospital and the, cancer? I was a little confused at that. So what did you think of that beginning?
For the very beginning, I kind of liked how they established. I didn't know what was going on. You had supernatural feels. To me, it was something out of the ring. Remember when the girl jumped out of the TV and her hair was covered? That was
Yeah.
kind of like what the entity ish thing looked like. I was like, I don't know where we're going with this. Um, So I liked kind of the fact that it kept you guessing. It established right away that she's pregnant, she's in an abusive relationship. Remember, he went. It was like a tooth. Like he bashed her head in, but it also looked like he punched her in the stomach as well. It was like
Um,
a two yeah thing. It maybe it happened so quick.
w well, yeah, I think he just bashed her head in the wall because they didn't say anything about him punching her. I know
Right.
he poked her stomach.
Right.
That's that's when they were fighting. He poked her stomach, and then she pushed him, and then he shoved her head in the wall, right? And
Right.
that's when the fight ended because obviously she was bleeding, and he ran to get ice, and she locked him out of the room.
Right. But it was
Uh,
it was interesting though because at first in the very beginning I thought he was like the caring husband where he was like, well, don't go to work, stop working. You're pregnant, you need to be at home resting, and then you kind of realize that's not the case because one of his lines afterwards was like, it's your fault that you keep having all these miscarriages. Basically, you keep
yeah,
killing the babies.
yeah, I got he was douchey initially just because
Hmm.
he's like on the bed with his shoes on watching UFC. I'm like, what kind of jerk wears his shoes in bed? And then you see your wife is kind of struggling because she comes upstairs. She's like holding her belly. She's like, I have a headache. Uh,
Hmm.
do we have any Tylenol? And he doesn't really answer her because he's watching the fight. And it's like, this guy's a douchebag. Well, and then he proves it. That he's abusive because like him getting shoved, it results in him putting her head into the wall. I mean,
Right.
he shoved her really hard, like it was
Yeah.
an impactful. She hits the wall and then she slumps to the floor, and it's like, holy shit, did he kill her? Like because she slumped down,
Right.
and so that established that. But then 5 minutes later, he's dead, like
Yeah.
horribly killed.
It happened quick. It was really quick. I was like, oh, okay. But I liked how they did also the part with the couch because I didn't know what was going on. I was like, is the couch moving?
Yeah,
Yeah,
he sees the ghostly thing and he turns on the light and there's nothing there, right?
right.
And I like when James Wan does that because it's in the same shot and there's something there and then the lights come on, there's nothing there. And you're like, oh shit. And but he saw the couch cushion inflate, which means someone was sitting there, so he wasn't
Hmm.
imagining it. That's why he keeps looking around the house. But then they do the horror trope, he looks around the corner, nothing's there, and then all of a sudden something's behind him and then he gets killed.
Yeah. They did a good job with just, killing him right away and not stretching that out. So I like that part. What was also very interesting was the black cop, how automatically, there's murder. I mean, there was motive. She kept saying that there was a motive with the
Yeah.
murder.
Yeah.
Yeah,
She
so that was interesting.
yeah, yeah, she's like, there's motive, and then they go to examine his body later, and I think she
Hmm.
says again, just, because they're like, okay, home invasion, no forced entry, so she was like throwing that right out the window. She's like, no home invasion. So you have a locked house, an abusive husband, and now he's dead, and there's no forced entry, so no one else is in the house, no other
Right,
fingerprints but theirs. So she's like motive, right? So she's hinting that the wife killed him.
right.
And, you'll find out later, well, she wasn't wrong, but
No.
we don't it was too early. No, it's too early, but you're like, "Nah, how could that be?" Because you see the ring black thing and,
Hmm.
so that that was the misleading part, and later, um, the wife, Madison, her name is
Yes.
Madison, she gets discharged from the hospital and she goes home.
Hmm.
And then as soon as she's home and she's getting ready for bed, she sees something in the street, and the lights in the street get weird. They're flickering, and then it goes out, and do the same thing. She sees something walk out into the street, and then the light comes back on, and it's not there. So she's panicked, and she knows something's wrong. She thinks something is following her, watching her. So she gets up in the morning, and I know they do these scenes in horror movies and do it in a lot of movies where someone conveniently has all the tools they need to completely secure their house. Like she bolts up the windows with board. She changes her locks. She puts in these big heavy screws in there and whatever. And look, I love tools. I'm a guy. I have a lot of tools. I have power tools and all this stuff. I do not have all the supplies I need. If I saw some shit like that, the night before, and I went, "Fuck that! I'm bored up. I have to go run to Home Depot for the day and get plywood and shit. I don't have the stuff handy." She just had everything handy. She just boarded up her windows and screwed into locks, and I was like, "Oh shit, okay," you know. But it was funny at the same time because every horror movie does that, where all of a sudden the hero is like, "Well, fuck this. I'm boarding up my house. Nobody's getting in here." Um, so her sister comes to visit her, and she can't get in the house, obviously, because she boarded everything up and she put in these deadbolts, so you can't open the door. And so she climbs up to the window, and the sister lets her in. And then the
Mhm.
first big reveal of the movie is like, oh, well, I'm adopted, right? She tells the sister, they have a conversation about the husband. Well, she reveals, like, oh, he was beating me. Okay. And then she had multiple miscarriages. You find out that this isn't the first child she's lost. I think it's the third.
Right.
And sister's like, "Oh my god, it's because he's a jackass and he didn't let me in your life." And it's like, "Yo, he was abusing me too." It's like, "Ah, you know, fuck him." And then she tells, I forgot how the conversation progressed to where it's like, "Oh, I was adopted." And um, so then what happened right after that? Did
Well, they went to
did we
go
go?
to the mom. Remember
I
Janine?
know did they visit her right at that scene, or was there more with the
I think it
cop?
was a little bit more with the cop because remember Sean Moss, are the cop's name,
Yeah.
and they was going around trying to do the investigation, and they discovered Madison as a child in the house, and then remember it was how it was like they discovered that she had reconstructive surgery, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, that seemed that I think that happened later, because what happened before that was we cut to a woman giving a tour of the Seattle Underground,
Right.
and we don't know who this woman is. She's just giving a tour, and we see the lights get weird on the tour, and she's like, "Ooh, spooky," she makes a joke about it. But we've seen that before, so you get the hint that whatever happened before to Madison with the weird electrical things happening is there.
Hmm.
So she ends the tour and she locks up and she's about to go home, and then the lights get weird again. She hears a noise, and then you see something and do the camera thing. I guess it's from the perspective of the thing, right, running at
Right.
her,
Yeah.
and she's fumbling around to get a flashlight or something out of her bag. She's fumbling around. Oh, she's trying to plug a construction light in. It's right there, and she's trying to fumbling with it because she's scared. And then
Hmm.
she gets it on, and then you see there's nothing there. But then something is on the ceiling, and it jumps at her really fast.
Right.
And then she blacks out. And the next thing you see is a giant fan. You see light coming through as a giant fan. This ratty attic, and spider webs everywhere and whatever. And she's tied up. She's tied up, her waist, her hands, and she's strapped to the wall. And then you see someone getting dressed in like black leather or something, and putting on black gloves, and then says like, "Oh, I've been." Oh, but the crazy thing is, like, the person isn't speaking to her. The radio is speaking to her, right?
Hmm.
The radio gets really weird, and then you hear this creepy voice come over the radio. It says, "Oh, I waited a long time, but I can wait longer because something about Dr. Weaver. I need Dr. Weaver first, or something." And you're like, "Oh, that name is familiar because that's the name of the woman that we first see at the beginning of the movie,
Right.
who's doing the recording." So then it cuts to Dr. Weaver in present day, and she's much older, and she has a nice house, and she's sitting there in her study, and she gets a call, and it's the same creepy voice saying, it tells her we have to cut out the cancer, which is repeating her words from the beginning of the movie,
Hmm.
because that's what she said when they restrained the creature in the hospital. So she gets really confused, and then but I guess something clicks in her mind, and she pulls out a case file, and that's when you see a picture of a young girl, and it says Emily May on it. And that's when it starts to come together, like, okay, it's a guy's voice threatening her and sounds like a man, but she pulls out the case file, and even though it said Gabriel on it, on the file or somewhere on it, when she opens the folder, you see a picture of a girl, and that's like one of the first hints. And then the girl kind of looks like Madison, but they don't make that clear till later.
Right.
So yeah, so that's the setup for that, and then I think it cuts back to Madison like trying to do laundry, and she sees that her head's bleeding, and then so she goes to put stuff in the laundry. She sees a woman's face on the other side of the washer, and she gets freaked out. And she's like, "What are you doing in my house?" And she's like, "What are you doing in my house? Like this is my house." And then she panics and she backs out of the room, but then she can't move her body. She's like, "I can't move for some reason." And then they have this cool effect where the house melts around her and
Mm-hmm.
reforms into another house, and so she doesn't know what's happening, and then she can see this woman clearly, and then she sees the figure in black attacking this woman,
Right.
like throws her around, I mean really beats the shit out of her. And then she has this nice award, which was foreshadowed when she was on the phone. You see this award, and it's a big knife. It's with the Hippocratic symbol, and it says excellence on it. So you're like, oh, that's gonna come in later. Anytime to do that in a horror movie with a sharp object, yeah, that's gonna be used for horrible things later. And it is, because the figure in black takes the award, and then I forgot what he said to her, and then just bludgeons this chick to death. I mean, it was just brutal. Like blood is just flying everywhere, all over her kitchen, kills her.
Yes.
And Madison sees all of it, right? Sees all of it in her mind somehow. And you're like, okay, so her and this killer have a connection, like a psychic connection, because she sees all this plain as day, like if she was sitting there. And you're like, how is this possible? Yeah, so with that, so the pieces start falling into place. What I picked up on, and I realized that obviously this movie has a big twist.
Mm-hmm.
But when they show the killer, and you see how the killer moves, then I was like, okay, I get what's happening. But I was like, I'll wait it till later. But I already figured out what the twist was from that moment
Oh,
when they
really?
yeah, I had figured it out. Like I was like, okay, it's pretty obvious, because there's a big deal with how the killer moves,
Mm-hmm.
and you can see the legs and the arms don't look right, and so what did you think about that, and that
Well, with the
that middle
whole
part?
the middle part with the whole dream sequence, and Doctor Weaver just being bludgeoned to death. Again, I still didn't know. I'm the only. I didn't figure it out yet. I just thought it was something that was supernatural, that was probably trying to get its footing, because it didn't move like a normal human being did. And then therefore, I would just didn't understand why is this random spirit running around trying to kill people,
Right, I
and its
got
connection.
I so when it killed Dr. Euro, I was like, okay, it goes back to the beginning. They show the
Mm-hmm.
hospital and everything. And then it repeats her words back to her, we have to cut out the cancer. So you're like, this killer is the thing that was in the room and she was talking to.
Mm-hmm.
But then I was like, all right, this all started after she hit her head, right? And I was like,
Right.
okay. But I didn't put that together till I saw how the killer moved, and I was like, okay, this killer walks backwards. And I was like, oh, they didn't, right? With the it only became clear to me after the scene with the lady in the Seattle Underground getting captured, and then the scene in the attic, and how the killer moved, and I was like, oh shit. I was like, they're gonna say that this thing is on her back, right? And I figured that out. Yeah, so I figured that out from there. But I was like, and then it fell into place for me. It's like, okay, she hit her head and this thing woke up. All right, so I'm like, okay, they're doing that. But I didn't understand how she was seeing it, and how she was doing her laundry and saw the killer do stuff. And I was like, are they they've done stories like that in another thing. So I think there was a movie, um not The Good Son. What was it called? It was with an author, and he had a split personality.
Oh gosh, was that the one with Johnny Depp?
No, 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 no. Not that one. It was a '80s movie. I can't. Raising Cain. They did that,
Oh,
and they've done it. Obviously, the most recent, probably more popular example I can think of is Fight Club,
Oh yeah.
right? So I was like, oh, she's having a Tyler Durden moment, right? So she's essentially Tyler Durden. I mean Edward Norton's character.
Mhm.
Um, so I was like, but I have to see how this is playing out. And then we go back and forth between the detectives and then her, and then she sees more murders. There's another doctor who was in the hospital. I mean, we didn't really see him in the beginning scene
No.
because we mostly saw Dr. Weaver, but there were other doctors there. I remember the security guard just because of what happened to him, but I thought the lady in the attic, I didn't know, I didn't put that together who she was. I thought she was in the hospital too. I thought maybe she was a nurse or something, and that's why the killer captured her. But after Dr. Weaver, and then the killer's back in the attic, and it takes her ward, and it turns it into a knife, like a dagger, right?
Mhm.
Sharpens it, pulls all the ornaments off, carves something into it, and makes it a real knife. And then when the lady who's tied up, she tries to break away, all of a sudden that knife comes right inches from her head, like thrown through the wood. And he
Mhm.
said, "Don't even think about it." And I was like, okay, this lady is important to this killer somehow because he could have just killed her right there. That knife could have gone through her head. If this was a normal horror movie, she would have been dead. Like the
Right.
knife would have gone through her head. But he didn't. He threatened her. And I was like, okay, why is he keeping her alive? She's more important than just a nurse or something.
Well, at that point, that's when I was still slightly confused. Like I realized that this, for me, I didn't think that this was like part of her, but she was able to tap into his subconscious, and because of that, I knew that there was a connection somehow. She's able to see what he's doing,
Hmm.
and clearly he can't kill her. So I figured that there was some kind of energy that he was feeding off of, and only she was able to see him. But I still thought it was supernatural.
Yeah, that's where I had a problem with the movie because I thought that's where they were leading to a supernatural entity or something connected to her. But then it turns into a slasher movie.
Hmm.
And that's where the second act goes, and you have this killer who wears black, this big black coat and gloves, and now has fashioned a weapon out of this award, as a symbolic thing because he killed the doctor that wronged him, I guess, or wronged it. And then so but then it becomes a slasher movie, especially when you get the scene where the cop figures out who Madison is, right? He goes through all the case files of Dr. Weaver. He gets it, and he finally finds one which conveniently had a lot of USB drives in it. Like he opens a file, it's like US. I know it's like, wait a minute. I know USB drives have been around for a while, but this shit happened in the early '90s. Would
They
they
didn't
would
have,
have
it was
been have
still zip disks.
yeah, yeah, you would think you'd find zip disk or floppy disk. No, he finds flash drives in there. So he takes out the flash drive and he puts it in. And I don't know if anybody's ever looked at has ever archived stuff on flash drives, but you have like 1,000 folders and everything. He opens the first folder, and there's a nice, convenient video that he just plays that gives him answers. It's like, oh, okay, Emily is Madison. So he kind of puts that together.
Hmm.
But then he finds a list of doctors who treated her, and then and then he's like, oh, there's this doctor Gregory or whatever his name is. Then he goes
Yep.
into not Google, looks him up. He also conveniently lives in Seattle. By the way, this whole movie is happening in Seattle, and every doctor who worked in this place, even though they were from different places, because Dr. Weaver later another record. There's 1,000 recordings of this woman. She said, "Oh, I've asked for this guy from Los Angeles and this guy from another part of the country." I'm like, but they all settled in Seattle after this place? Okay. So conveniently they're all in Seattle so they can get murdered. So the detective, what's his name? Samoa?
No, it was Moss.
Moss.
There's
Okay.
Moss. Yeah, it's Sean Moss.
Okay, Sean Moss. He figures out, okay, I gotta go because he's the next victim. He's put the pattern together
Hmm.
without seeing anything. So that's good on him. He drives over there, goes in. Um, Guy's already dead in his bathtub. He's bludgeoned to stabbed to death.
Mm-hmm.
And then but Madison is also seeing a projection of this in at the same time. So she sees the killer go in the bathroom, murder this dude. And then so she now sees the detective, and then she's yelling at him, obviously can't hear her, and the killer's in there, so they have a fight. But the detective Moss is obviously more capable than these doctors, so he holds his own. He shoots at the killer, and then the killer is moving really weird, and that was the where I got the killer's walking and moving backwards.
See, I
And
still didn't get that. I'm slow.
and I mean, you kind of see it, especially when the killer jumps out the window and starts going down the fire escape.
Right.
That's when it became clear. I'm like, Jesus, this guy is like contortionist. He's like backwards. It's like running and moving backwards. It was clear in that scene when Moss was chasing him, jumps out the window, then starts like parkouring down the fire escape. Doesn't climb down the fire escape like a normal person. Starts like falling down per floor and grabbing on and then letting go like it was a video game, and then gets to the floor. And Moss is like climbing down, like he's like not insane, so he's running down the ladder. Then he's like, "Fuck it," jumps off onto a dumpster, almost breaks his arm, chases this guy all the way in back to where the Seattle Underground tour was, gets in there,
Mm-hmm.
and then they get it. They have a fight in this old chamber with like stage coaches and all this old stuff from like the early 1900s.
Mm-hmm.
So they have a fight in there, and then the killer gets away.
Yeah.
Um, but what was confusing later is when Moss and the black cop interrogate Madison. He didn't really say anything like, "Oh, I saw the killer, so I believe you," because before she gave a sketch of him, and
Right.
they're like, "Oh," and the black cop makes, "Oh, you want us to look for Sloth from the Goonies? Is that who the killer is?" Well, later he should have said, "Yes, it's Sloth from the Goonies. I fought this guy, almost killed me. Yes, this is who we're looking for." And they're interrogating her and whatever, and uh, it's like, okay, this guy's dead now, and I like and they ask her questions like, "Oh, we're gonna bring in a regression therapist, gonna hypnotize you, and we're gonna find the answers." Okay,
Right.
so this hypnotist shows up and the hypnotizer, and she's flashing back. She's having these memories, and then all of a sudden she has a freak out. While it's doing all this, of course, typical horror movie, she's having a seizure. So they snap her out of it, and they're like, okay. Uh, then she remembers the killer's name is Gabriel, uh, and someone from her past. And we
Mm-hmm.
had gotten a clue before because she had gotten a phone call. Her phone rang in the hospital, not the hospital, the police station, and he calls her. Right, he calls Madison and says, "Oh, they took you away from me," or blah blah blah, whatever. And so but she said, how did I know his name? Because when she was on the phone, she's like, "I don't know who you are. I don't know why you're stalking me." But then he says he's going to kill somebody, her sister. And then she says, "Gabriel, stop." And then that's when she's like, "How do I know his name?" You
Right.
get the hypnotist. Now you find out that Gabriel was tied to her somehow. And it goes back to that institute in the 90s. Um, but before they get to follow up on that after the hypnotist, the tour guide from the underground, she gets out of her ropes, right? She's still up in the attic. She cuts her ropes off. And then she's trying to find a way out of the attic, and she falls through the floor. So when she falls to the floor, she falls into Madison's living room, and you find out it's her attic. And the cops are right there. They see her fall to the floor, like, holy shit. They immediately arrest her, and and they investigate the house. And I have to say a couple of things. Her sister is kind of an asshole, you know, because it's not just the scene, that scene, where the black cop told her, it's like, "I'm going to arrest you as an accessory if you don't get out of here," and she's being very pushy.
Mm-hmm.
But earlier, when near the beginning of the movie, when Madison's in the hospital and the detective comes to talk to her, sister pushes him out of the way, and it's like, "Well, maybe I can help you," whatever. It's like, bitch, somebody got murdered and you don't know what the hell's going on. And this guy's trying to do his job. And, and then through the whole movie, she's kind of like an asshole. I didn't like her character. and,
Hmm.
but it was like, what it is. Like, I don't, you think she'd be a little more likable, but she wasn't. I liked the CSI lady who was trying to hit on Detective Moss,
Yes.
and she was likable. She was cute. She was like trying to tease him, and he just wasn't getting it. He was just, whatever.
Oh
Um,
god.
but yeah, the second act goes on a long time because they're dragging out this reveal, this like peeling back Emily's past.
Hmm.
Um, right after that, so they arrest Madison. They bring her to the police station and they are interrogating her now as a suspect. And she's in the interrogation room and they're talking to her. The black cops yelling at her. Moss is not saying anything, even though that's where I had another problem with the movie. I'm like, wait a minute, you fought the killer, so I don't think in the back of your mind you suspect her because you actually fought this guy, and you
Hmm.
would just go, no, this guy kicked my ass and parkoured down the fucking fire escape. I don't
Mm.
think this lady is capable of that.
But he didn't know the connection though.
He didn't,
So
but I would think he would have stuck up for her and say, "I don't think she's the killer," right? But he didn't. He just went along. The black cop kind of took
right.
charge of it. So, and she was like all into like, "You did it, right? You killed your husband, and then these people tried to fix you when you were a kid, didn't work. You killed them too." And but she's sitting there kind of somber, and then the detective Moss's phone rings and it's an unknown number, and she
Hmm.
says, "Oh, he wants to talk to you." And then of course they put him on speaker and they record it, and the killer's taunting them, and just like he could talk to the radio, he's talking through the phone. Um,
Right.
but you don't know that. You think he's actually calling them from somewhere. So, again to kind of hammer home. Okay, so there's another person, but they still lock her up, right? They put her in a holding cell. Now
Yeah.
that holding cell scene was freaking crazy, right? When you get there. But I think in between there was the sister driving to the creepy
Yes.
hospital
Yeah.
to find out about her. And again, like, I don't know, kind of bitchy. She calls up the orphanage that I guess adopted her sister or adopted Madison to her family. And they're like, okay, this happened in the 90s. We don't, this before I worked here. I don't know. She just hangs up on them like, "Arr." Goes to creepy hospital, parks on the edge of a cliff. By the way, I'm like, that's the best place to park because if shit goes down in a horror movie, that's where you want your car, at the edge of a cliff. Nothing could go wrong. But I know,
Yeah.
she goes to the hospital, slinks around. It's creepy. She hears things, but I mean, it's an old abandoned building. She goes and she finds VHS tapes and files on her sister, and she takes the whole thing back to her mom's place, and they start watching the VHS tapes. And
Hmm.
while you're peeling that back, it's cutting back to the holding cell, and Madison's in the holding cell, and the other women in the holding cell are fucking with her, right?
Right.
And one lady starts getting really aggressive with her and then kind of goads her into a fight, and then this black lady starts slapping her around, and that's when they get to the third tape and you find out what Gabriel is.
Very true.
And what did you think of that reveal? Like,
With the whole thing so far, I still had an issue with everything. Still seemed to be a matter of convenience.
hmm
Her being in the room with the detectives, and then all of a sudden Gabriel's just calling.
hmm
To say, oh, so it proves that it's not technically her because she's right there in the room with you. I felt as more as you watched it, it was to throw you off of what was really going on. But overall, it did feel really convenient. The whole thing with the doctor still being there, the hospital, the edge of the cliff. It kind of felt like everything that you're not supposed to do in horror movies that
yeah.
they did.
Yeah, every doctor that worked on her still lived in Seattle. was really close to, getting there. Also, the killer is able to open any lock and any window. And they made a point that Gabriel somehow controls electricity. This was in the file. Even in the opening credits, they're
Mhm.
flashing all this stuff, right? But I paused some of it, and you can read, patient can manipulate electricity, right? That was one of the lines in the files.
See, that
And
was
that's always
also confusing.
yeah, that was, with the lights flickering all the time or blowing up. Remember, the
Right.
lights in the hospital like exploded in that beginning scene, and then, in the house with the blender, and the husband turns the blender, the TV turns itself on and off. So, but I could get that. So I can get and the anything with electric locks, but somehow every single doctor who has had their house or window locked, the killer just opens them. Right? The window's open. The second doctor, right? He's putting his clothes out. Then all of a sudden
Yep.
his window's wide open. Rain is in there, and they do the spooky thing where he goes in his closet and the lights off. And you think, oh, the killer's in there. It's like, it's not in there. And then he's like,
Mm-mm.
ready. And then he just goes to bed. He's just like, I guess everything's fine. Goes to bed and
Uh,
gets murdered later.
well, I
But
guess to throw you off because the jump scares. It didn't
yeah,
really pay off.
yeah. They did a couple of jump scares, but mostly they were fake outs, right?
Right. I'm
Um,
happy it wasn't heavy-handed because we've seen some movies it's just over the top with the jump scares.
Yeah. This movie doesn't lean too. I'm happy. James Wan doesn't lean too much on jump scares. He'll do fake outs where you're tense and you think something's gonna happen and then nothing happens.
Right.
Uh, with the holding cell slash VHS scene, that's where the movie culminates. And you get the reveal of what Gabriel is, and that he's a he's a teratoma. He was a conjoined twin, but he's the inferior twin, I guess, or what do they call it? The
No, he
recessive
was
twin?
no. He's the wasn't he the he was the one. I guess you would call it inferior, even though he's
Yeah.
the one that's sucking out the life of her.
Yeah, well, they said he was a parasitic twin. So he was
Right.
conjoined to her. It's like two embryos didn't separate, and then she became the dominant embryo, so she developed properly, and he was conjoined to her, and he was inferior, and he's living off of her. So, and then there's a movie like that, from years and years ago from the 70s. It's called Basket Case.
Mm.
um, with a thing like that. Except the twins were separated, and one brother keeps his conjoined inferior parasitic brother in a basket and carries with him, and this brother kills people. So it's similar to this, except in basket case it was
Mm.
separated from him. In this case, the twin is attached. Um, so they in the VHS they show it. They're talking to Emily May, and you see her front, and then the doctor's like, bring the camera around, and they go to her back, and you see that this nasty gross
Mm-hmm.
person is fused to her back. It's like little flailing arms. It has ribs that stick out of her back, and then there's a head on the back of her head, but a face, more like a face, like half a face.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really hideous, and that's Gabriel, right?
Yes.
So what we see in the beginning, when they're dragging her to behind the tarp. You're seeing her from her back, so you're seeing Gabriel, and that's why he looks monstrous. She doesn't look like that. And when Dr. Weaver was saying we cut out the cancer, what she was saying was we're cutting him off of her.
Right.
And so you see that in the videotapes they're watching, and that was in the intro too, all the surgery and the slicing. They actually cut most of him off of Emily, which is only in movie logic could you have that level of reconstructive surgery
Hmm.
where you could remove ribs and partial organs from somebody's back and have their back look completely normal. That's on a level of miracle surgery that's probably
Oh
unheard
god.
of, because like think about data, like nobody knew this. Like nobody saw any
No.
type of surgery on her back. Her husband didn't see this. Her family,
No.
her growing up, nobody saw her back. Like, your back looks weird.
And she never complained about any back pain or
No, no pain, no surgical
nothing.
pain, nothing. I mean, the level of hacking they did to her in those scenes, like they show them cutting him off. I'm like, you would have had pain and therapy and follow-up surgeries for years, right?
Mhm.
To deal with that. Nope, they just boom, boom, one operation.
And she was
She's
at the
done.
age to know, like, hey, there's a twin on my back.
Yeah.
So this
She
wasn't like a newborn baby.
Yeah. Also, she recovers from it pretty fast because when she gets adopted, she still knows about Gabriel, but she doesn't have any regret, and that's a flaw in the writing.
Hmm.
You had a twin removed from you, but she had no feelings about it that he was gone. Then all of a
Yeah.
sudden he just becomes an imaginary friend and a voice in her head, right?
Right.
That he's still talking to her in her youth, and somehow he gets completely repressed because uh her adopted sister is born, and somehow that represses him.
Well, he does tell her to go kill a kid.
Yes, yes, there's
He's
that scene.
very
Yes,
upset.
the birthday cake scene. Yes, that
Hmm.
was very disturbing. But that's the thing. It's like he had so much influence, and then he didn't. Like there
Right.
was nothing in her youth. Like she didn't get hit in the head when she was a kid, and that repressed him. Like where you'd say there was this counter injury that repressed him, or Dr. Weaver in the surgery did something so he was dormant. No, he was active in her brain still, causing her to hallucinate and do
Hmm.
horrible things up until her sister was born, and then somehow that magically repressed him
Well,
for
yeah, that
years.
was weird because if you go to that scene where Emily, they cut out the tumor
Yeah.
and they're in her brain. So I guess because they was in there and he was hiding, he was trying to physically hide. He probably went in too far in, and that's where he just lay dormant.
Well they showed in the surgery that they literally pushed his face into her skull, right?
Hmm.
And that was the weird part. So they said in the surgery in Weaver's notes, she said, "We can't cut him off of her brain without killing her."
Right.
So what they did is they severed as much of him as possible, and you see them literally push his twisted little face into her skull and then seal her skull. So, I mean, that's some horror movie logic. They just went, "No, we'll just push him in there, seal her skull, and then it's done. He's gone." So he's literally still in her skull,
Hmm.
attached to her brain. And so when she's a kid and she's adopted already, you see the things like she's talking on her little toy phone, which I guess he makes light up when he wants to talk to her,
Yeah.
and she'll answer it, and is having conversations with her. So he's still active in her mind. And then he does the thing, the birthday cake scene, where he makes her get the knife and makes her think she's slicing a cake, but she's about to cut into um her adopted mother's stomach. She's pregnant with her sister, and then
Hmm.
she snaps out of it. And she's freaked out. But he had that much influence over her. And then there was a line later where it's like, "Oh, if you weren't born, I would still be here." And it's like, but how did that make you go away? Like that didn't wasn't clear. It he was reactivated because she had her skull cracked open, right? So
Right.
he kind of emerged somehow from that. But it's like, but they didn't explain the surgery didn't stop him. He was still active in her mind up until May's sister was born, and then she just went, I just don't need you anymore." And then
He was angry. I don't know. Like he just went away and then was reawoken when she
yeah,
got her head bashed in. But my thing is, the husband was abusive for a while now.
yeah,
So was it just a particular spot he had to hit? Why wasn't he there to protect her the other times? Was he mad and then went away because she wouldn't kill the unborn sister? Then there was the part where like they're two separate people all of a sudden because remember she's able to see him but the others can't see him, so that's where just not knowing all of the information it became confusing.
yeah. I think they didn't make that clear that
No.
they're doing the Fight Club thing where she's a projection. Like when he takes over her body,
Hmm. she
sh-
she
she
just can't
she,
see it.
she yeah, she's now projected outside of her body, and she can
Hmm.
see everything around it. but which is also weird because it's like, how is she seeing that? When she sees through his eyes, she's seeing from her perspective, which is they did that in Fight Club too, and it's kind of weird. But it's like, okay, Tyler Durden takes over his body, and but he's somehow hanging out away from him, and he knows everything that's happening outside of where Tyler Durden is, but
Yeah.
his body's in there with him, like because it's him. So that's weird. So they're doing the Fight Club thing, and but then yeah, they have conversations, and it's later. Um, when she's yelling at Gabriel in the cell thing, and it's like, yeah, they're two different people, but they're I don't know where that's
It was
happening.
weird.
Yeah, yeah. Uh,
It
so
was.
and also, okay, so we'll get back. We'll just blow through the third act because the third act is all brutal action, and I think that her body count trumps Jason and for in one movie.
Oh
So
god.
she basically pulls a Terminator. She kills an entire police station
Yeah.
somehow, and that maybe I think a lot of people would check out at that point. Like this,
Yeah.
this in a contorted state with Gabriel running around with her body backwards, is able to off every cop in the Seattle police station, like
Nope.
every single one.
Bullet. No nothing.
The only survivor was the CSI chick who hit herself in the evidence room when she came in to get the jacket and the dagger back.
Yep.
And so she lived. Everybody else was murdered. Everyone in that holding cell. And that holding cell was the big reveal because Madison freaks out and she kneels on the floor and then she pulls her skull open, right?
Mhm.
The back of her skull, and his twisted face pops out of it, right? And then starts contorting, the arms contort, and yeah, and the women are all freaking out in the cell, and then he just slaughters everyone in that cell. And then the guard comes in, tries to shoot her. He gets killed. She gets out and then just murders a room full of officers. Just and Detective Shaw shows up with the black. I forgot the black cop's name. He called it black cop.
Moss. Is
No,
it?
no.
No, it's not. It's not
Was
Moss.
it was the guy's name Moss or her name Moss?
No, her. I thought her name was Moss and his name was Shaw. Or
Oh,
was it?
okay.
Let's
Oh,
see.
okay. So I keep okay. So Moss and Shaw, they're there. They show up, and they're like the last cop standing. And I use that term loosely because somehow, and this was a weird part of the scene. So, Moss takes a shotgun and chases off Gabriel, like just starts blasting the office, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Gabriel climbs all the way to the other side of the room. This is a big room. It's a big kind of open office room. Takes a chair with with I don't know, it's her legs, and flings it. And Moss and Shaw are hobbling out of the room. This chair hits them square on, and they just get knocked out. Like bam. I was like, that is a Hail Mary shot. I don't know how Gabriel did that because I thought Gabriel was going to take the chair and shatter the window and jump out, right? Leave the police station. No,
No.
takes that chair and flings it backwards and cracks them both there and knocks them out.
Well, remember, I guess he flings it backwards because his backwards is forward.
Yeah, but I mean
So
to hit them, just not just okay. Gabriel also has insane strength for some reason.
yeah,
They don't
yeah.
explain that at all.
Well, they did say that he was feeding off of her, which is why she's always incredibly skinny and having the miscarriages. So
Right, but
maybe like the baby embryo is like
yeah,
starting.
but that doesn't make sense because right, he's feeding off of her. He's a parasite, so she's weak. But when he takes over her body, she's ultra strong. It's still the same body, and doing things backwards, right? He has to contort to for him because he's facing her back, so
Mm-hmm.
he's contorted. So can you imagine lifting weights backwards or whatever, or just doing anything or running backwards? So it's crazy, and so like the chair thing wasn't even the thing. I mean, just breaking bones, like the chicks in the cell, like the holding cell scene is insane. Just like stomps on one chick, stomps on the chick's head, and this chick's head squishes like. It was kind of reminded me of Halloween, the Halloween remake
Mm-hmm.
recently. Michael Myers did that to one of the cops, although he stepped on his head and it flat out exploded. But it
Yeah.
was sort of like that. And breaking arms, like you see the bones pop out, just like the guy in the beginning. I mean, so Madison, uh, fairly weak normally, but when Gabriel takes over, can just snap bone like nothing and murder indiscriminately and dodge bullets. By the way, because
Mm-hmm.
the cops are unloading all over that office. There is no regard for gun safety at that point. They are shooting everywhere. They're shooting all over the place. She's just dodging like the Matrix, and then and stabs them. Right there's that scene.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and some of it's CG. You can tell it's a little CG where the camera's panning around her and she's stabbing a cop and it throws her into another guy and then slashes.
Yes.
I mean, they just decimates every cop in that station's dead.
So bad.
Except for Moss and Shaw and the CSI girl. They're the only ones left.
So bad.
Then so the culmination was Gabriel goes to the hospital where the tour guide was. You find out that the tour guide for the Seattle Underground is Madison's birth mother. Is
Mm-hmm.
Serena May is her name, and she gave her up to the institute for research because she was raped, and her mother said that the baby was an abomination and that she couldn't take care of it, so she gave up her child to the researchers.
Right.
So and then she's in the hospital because she fell through the ceiling when she tried to escape the attic. She's in a coma. She's in the
Mm-hmm.
hospital. So Gabriel goes there, I guess, to finish killing everyone who wronged him, which is kill her. And the sister goes there. When the sister gets there, a guard tries to stop her from going in, but his pacemaker starts fucking up. He's having a heart attack. The
You
lights are
can.
blowing up because Gabriel's showing up and the electric powers, and then gets in there, tells his sister that he was going to save her for last, but he's going to kill her. And she's begging Madison to help them. And Madison's standing there in the corner because I guess she's astral projecting out of her mind to see what's happening. And then Gabriel flips a hospital bed. One of the like a
Yep.
bed you'd be in the hospital,
Yep.
flips it on the sister, like flips it where it twirls in the air and lands on her. I guess squishing her leg because she goes for the detective's gun. By the way, Detective Shaw is taken out of commission. She throws the dagger right through his arm, like it's through his shoulder, like almost like a dart. She throws it, hits him. He's I don't know if he's dead. He was just on the floor wincing in pain, but you don't see him for the rest of this scene. And his gun conveniently rolls into the room. The sister picks it up. Gabriel throws the bed on her, pins her legs, and then he takes the gun. He's about to shoot her. But then we have the weird scene Dana's talking about where Madison and him
Yeah.
confront each other in a mind space. I don't know what to
It's
call
like
it.
a projected illusion safe space. I don't
Yes.
know.
And somehow and she only finds the strength to do this because the sister yells at her that he's the reason she's had all the miscarriages, that
Yep.
he has sucked all the nutrients out of her, and that's why she lost all the babies. She's like, he was rebuilding himself, so he killed all of your babies. And that's when she gets, I guess, mom rage. She gets real mad, and because she balls up her fist, and I was like, okay, then she's
Oh
mad, right?
god.
She balls up her fist. I thought she was balling up her fist because she's going to take control of her hand again and
Right.
punch him or something, but no, she balls up her fist, and then we see Gabriel shoot the sister, right? Like nothing. I guess it's a fake out, right? James
Mm-hmm.
Wan and his fake outs. Shoots the sister, and he goes over to the mom, and he says something awful, and kills her. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Boom. And then all of a sudden, the hospital room melts around him, and he's like, what's going on? And she confronts him in the mind space or the illusion space, and tells him, oh, I now can do all the things you can do.
Right.
And I was like, wait a minute, now all of a sudden you can
It
you
was
can
so. That was the point where I wanted to rage quit the movie.
I know, but
I
I mean, you're basically at the end, so like you're like really okay.
hated this so much with all of my heart because it just was ridiculous. Like, I understand there are so many horror movies where we have to find out where the killer is and it's supernatural and some voodoo or whatever it was. And so it tried its best to be original.
Yeah,
And yes, but it was so over the top with it that it was a complete turnoff. That once it started with that scene in the prison or the police station, and he started ducking and diving the bullets like it was some type of Matrix thing. I
yeah,
mean, I think they filmed it really great because it was unique. Because technically he was forward, but he was technically hour backwards.
yeah.
So that part was like really great. But then it just started getting so ridiculous and over the top, where it was like I don't know how I made it through. I think because it was closer towards the end, where it was just like, let me just finish this off.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
this was all over the place and
It, it
ridiculous.
it was like I would have liked like in the beginning when I thought it was supernatural. If they had gone in that direction, this would have been a much better movie. But
Mm-hmm.
it devolves into a slasher movie, and the twist is crazy and out there.
Mm-hmm.
And even the fact that okay, you have this killer living inside you, and he contorts your body and takes it over. But the things he was able to do with her body was ridiculous, like
Mm-hmm.
dodging bullets, just stabbing dozens of people at once, throwing chairs with perfect accuracy, fucking parkour, like I just ridiculous, crazy shit.
It was bad.
And then the end of the movie is just not satisfying at all.
No.
Like there is no real closure to this movie.
Mm-mm.
She confronts him in that illusion mind space and literally locks him in a cage, which I guess is in her mind. Says, I'm, she basically goes, I'm the captain now, locks him in a cage, and it's like, you'll never come out again. And then she said some weird line like, oh, if you ever come back, I'll be ready for you. And I'm like, what? What does that mean? How? Oh,
It didn't make any sense. It
yeah,
reminded me of Doctor Sleep. Remember at the end, where it's like the box and then you lock the box in your mind.
yeah, it's exactly that. But just the cheesy lines she was saying, like all of a sudden she found confidence, which was out of nowhere,
Mm-hmm.
and didn't even um. I thought she would throw it back. And it's like, oh, you killed my children, and you killed this, kill. No, there was none of that. She didn't have any remorse. Like even though her husband was an awful, terrible douchebag, twisted his head off. She took her birth mother and tied her up in the attic, and now she's in a coma. Her
Mm-hmm.
sister's legs are probably crushed under a hospital bed. Not to mention the just rampant murder in between there that she's going to have to answer for. I mean, you're talking 30, 40 police officers. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if they don't kill this woman after this, she's going to be in jail for the rest of her life.
If
But
she was
you
black.
yeah, I mean, but I think they'll just shoot her. I mean, no, you kill cops, like you're dead either way. Like it doesn't matter what color. You could be purple, you're dead.
Mhm.
So she, so the movie ends and she gets control of her body. But I'm like, nope, nope, nobody shows up in that hospital. Apparently, nobody else worked in that hospital, but that security guard who had the pacemaker, who's now, I guess, he had a heart attack.
Mhm.
Nobody shows up. She's just on the floor hugging her sister, who I guess her legs are crushed. So she like crawls over to her and they hug. And they have this emotional moment, and then they do the horror trope where it pans over to a light and you hear it buzz. So I guess Gabriel is still
He's still
active.
there.
Yeah, still there around her. But I'm like, it's stupid because first of all, you have these gaping holes in logic beforehand, and then afterwards it's like this woman will have no quality of life if she's not outright executed for murdering cops. And and just the amount of murder was ridiculous.
Hmm.
um and kidnapping and all the other charges she'll face. Also, the unbelievability, the cops, Moss and Shaw didn't believe her. And then who is going to believe? It's like, okay, so you have a killer in your skull that comes out. and he takes over your body and causes you to murder, right?
Hmm.
Nobody's gonna believe that. I mean, even if they do an X-ray on her, or they'll cut her open. I guess that'll be the sequel. They'll go, okay, we'll see if there's a face in there, and they cut her
A
skull open,
face.
and then he'll come, and that'll be Malignant too, right? But yeah, it's just, oh, that ending. I thought it'd be more satisfying, or I thought like they would do like she sacrifices herself because she's too dangerous to live,
Right.
and that was the fist thing. I thought the fist thing was he had the gun right on the sister, and I thought she was taking her fist to point the gun at her own head, and just going, this, we're done. I have to end you. I have to end
Right.
myself, right? No, no, just this weird cage thing, locks him in a cage, the box in her mind, and that solved it. That fixed it.
But even more, what was confusing, I don't know why he was there doing it. Like, I get he was mad at the hospital, and I understand that scene, but I thought at first he was there to protect her because remember, he killed the husband who was beating her.
Yeah,
So I'm like, oh, maybe it's like a protecting thing, brother, or whatnot. And it wasn't even that. It wasn't like I'm trying to escape you and leave my own life. It wasn't, I'm protecting you. It was just a thing that kills.
yeah,
It, then that was just it. And that I needed something more than that. It didn't have
yeah.
any purpose. The movie didn't
It
have purpose.
it didn't have purpose. It wasn't satisfying. I think the research thing could have been. I think it could have been better. You could have, at least, if all these doctors are going to get murdered, right? And
Hmm.
the only reason they get murdered in this movie is because they tried to save a girl's life. They cut this. He's like, this teratoma, this parasitic twin is on her, and he's horrible and he's murdering people. So let's
Hmm.
just get rid of him, right?
Right.
That was their only crime, and for that they get, this thing comes back and brutalizes all of them.
Right.
You could have made it their characters more reprehensible. They're at this hospital. Make it so that they created it, right?
Right.
They experiment on children. They created this thing and they try to cover up their crime. And maybe they stay in Seattle. It's like, okay, we can never talk about this again. Shut down the hospital, bury the files. We'll never speak of this again. We'll adopt
Hmm.
her out. We got rid of the problem. And then the problem comes back and comes at them for revenge, right? Your revenge. Revenge is the best plot point you could do. It writes itself after that. But the revenge is stupid in here because
Hmm.
this thing was awful from the beginning and it just kills, and then it doesn't want to protect her. It just wants to take over her life and just kill everything around it. And it's like, that's not really a motivation.
No, it didn't really have anything, and it was weird because it kind of felt like Warner Brothers trusted James Wan because Aquaman like made over $1 billion, so they're like, do whatever you want, here's money, do whatever you want.
Yeah,
But it didn't really just have any guidance, you know. I felt like it just needed, like you said before, it needed something more. It needed guidance. It needed to have a more of a reason. And yes, we have movies where the killer just kills just to kill, but
yeah,
overall, what about her? And
right.
then in the end, it's like, oh, hey, I locked you in my mind. That's it.
Yeah, just that's how you kill this unkillable thing. Oh, I'll just lock you in here.
Yeah.
I and then she somehow now has the strength that he had because she picks up the hospital bed that
Hmm.
he threw on the sister. She's like, well, if he could do it, I could do it. Then she picks the bed off. I'm like, okay. Right? But that's pointless because we're at the end of the movie. This show of strength means nothing. Because what are you gonna do? You're gonna avenge all the people that you murdered, that he made you murder? Like, what are you gonna
That
do?
was that was her training session to show that she's ready for him the next time.
Oh, yeah, please. I mean, because it's like it's not like he's another person who's away from you. He's in your head. So
Hmm.
if he reemerges, he's going to take over your body, and you're going to be astral projected out and watch him do horrible things, just like this movie. So there's really no like, I'll be ready for you. In what way? The only way you could be ready is if you got Amanda Waller from Suicide Squad to put one of those explosives in your
Mm-hmm.
head just in case he comes back out and you just pop that explosive right there. Like
Oh
boop,
god.
it's over.
Boop in the brain. Yeah, no, it just I didn't like it. I mean, I was with it. It had some good points. It kept you interested.
Yeah.
But then for me, it just kind of fell all the way apart. Where I didn't know what was going on, and half of the time I was like, I didn't really care. And the scene, like I said before, with the police station, yeah, you could say it's exciting. It was filmed. The whole movie itself looked good. It was
Yeah.
filmed well. The cinematography was great, but it was ridiculous.
Yeah, and also I think you can't borrow too many different influences and mash them into the same movie
Hmm.
because then you end up with kind of a mess. And that's what this was. It's like you started out with the supernatural thing and you had the hospital and the research center. There was all this potential there. It's like, oh, research center, or maybe they're doing fucked up experiments on kids.
Right.
Nope, that wasn't it. Oh, it's some kind of evil entity or ghost or something. Nope. Maybe it's tied to the house. Nope. Like none of that is realized. It's just this weird conjoined twin thing. I mean, maybe he saw Basket Case as a kid and thought I could do that, and he did his own take on it. Um, I just I think it's weird. I also think some of the set pieces were weird. Her house
Oh,
kind of looks like the Amityville house sort of, and it doesn't fit in that neighborhood she's in. I'm like,
sure.
so I thought, oh, this has a horror house vibe, except it doesn't. The house is fine. The house has nothing wrong with it. It's her, And then the research center looks like Notre Dame. I'm not kidding. If you watch the beginning of this movie, it's like, what am I looking at? It's on the water. What is this? And it says research hospital. And you're like, what hospital looks like that?
It's a generic research hospital. You've never
Yeah.
been there? On Research Island?
But it's like, you know what? If we make it look like a gothic castle, it would be cooler. It's like, no, that's just weird.
Yeah.
Uh,
No, it was just not good. And remember, James Wan was supposed to do The Trenches, which was a horror movie. So I wonder if this was kind of his audition. They canceled it though.
yeah.
So
Yeah, and it says he wrote it. He wrote it with a couple other people, but it said he directed it. He had the main story credit. He also produced it. And
mhm.
like you said, Warner Brothers, for their directors who do well, they give them a movie like this. This is like the Chris Nolan gift, right? This is Interstellar for James Wan.
Ouch.
They gave him, but it's not Interstellar because I mean that's actually a good movie.
Oh.
This this th- this I think he did need guidance, and it's like you have to
Mhm,
pick a lane. If this is a revenge killer movie, the revenge has to be palpable, and we have to at least understand the villain's motives.
mhm,
Well, we don't here. It's just this awful thing attached to this girl that gets cut away because it's already evil, and it just is worse when it comes back. It's like that's not. I don't really understand this. Um,
but this
and yeah.
mhm.
Go
No,
ahead.
I
Go
was
ahead.
just gonna say, the fact that also this is day and date release, so like this is also in theaters. I know you're not supposed to say that because yay, movie theaters. I was really happy that they did this, that this movie came that way, because I would have been angry if I saw this in the movie theater. Like I wasted my money, my time, my travel. I got food, and this was the movie.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. There was yeah, and I don't think they needed to do. If I can understand the parasitic thing, but I don't think you need to do kind of emotional manipulation with the whole she had a miscarriage. And then why she have miscarriages?
Mm.
Because it's sucking the life out of her. That's kind of upsetting, especially now I'm a parent. I can understand why he wrote that,
Right.
but you don't need to do it that way. You could have done other things like make her mysteriously sick. And there should have been more build up in the beginning to Gabriel's emergence than just her getting hit. And this happens in the first 20 minutes. We see the research hospital.
Hmm.
She, abusive douchebag husband rams her head in the wall within 10 minutes. Right? He's dead in 13 minutes. She comes home and we see the supernatural thing, and you think it's another movie that it's not in the first 20 minutes. And then a little bit after that, I think before 30 minutes, you're already we're in generic slasher town. The chick's in the attic. The killer
Mhm.
puts on the leather coat and makes threatening phone calls to the doctor, and
Mhm.
it's like, oh, is this a slasher movie? I literally I said that. I think I said that out loud. I was like, oh, is this just a slasher? We're not we're not gonna get The Grudge or something. This is just a killer in an attic. Oh, I was like, boo. But when I saw the attic thing too, I was like, in my mind, I was like, no, 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 they're not gonna say this thing is just her walking backwards, right? And then that's what it was. Because the way she moved, I was like, the way he moved, I should say, because Gabriel, part of her is male, and Madison's is a woman, but Gabriel, the way Gabriel moves, it's like, okay, this person is a contortionist and moving backwards. And I saw in the credits too, they said um, Gabriel, and then it had a parentheses like contortionist specialist, and he's credited. And it was also
Ah.
a woman too, like who did all those stunt scenes, like the parkour and all that stuff, which is
Mhm.
impressive that you could contort yourself and do that crazy shit, like grabbing onto fire escapes and ducking through holes, like sliding, like when okay, that those
Mhm.
scenes were good. The action scenes were very good. The scene, the I mean, it was brutal. The scene in the holding cell, the scene in the police station with her fighting the cops, even though it was outrageous, like this, you're like, oh my god, how is this possible? But it's still well filmed. The scene where Shaw chased uh, Gabriel into the Seattle Underground. That was well done. The whole chase thing that felt that felt like a cop movie, right? He's just like he's not giving up. He like throws himself into the dumpster and he keeps going and he chases. And then they have the creepy confrontation with all the old stuff in the underground. Of course, it's they end up in the creepiest room possible. There's like fog on the floor and these old stagecoaches, and the stagecoach almost hits Shaw. I guess Gabriel pushes it, but you don't see it, and you don't see it, and then they fight. Um, but those shots. So I can't knock James Wan. He knows how to frame shots. He's good at horror. He doesn't do jump scares, which is nice. He does fake outs though. I'm gonna call him the king of fake outs because he does fake outs. But this movie, like Dana said, needed guidance. It was too all over the place. He faked out the supernatural stuff. You think it's research. It is body horror, but not in the way you think. It's not like David Cronenberg or something. It's
Yeah.
just weird, and it gets too over the top with the abilities of Gabriel and what he's capable of, and dodging bullets and throwing big heavy objects, and also the electric power stuff, which they
I didn't get
also
that.
it but that's underutilized. Even if you say, okay, this parasite can manipulate electricity, which I get. Yes, I agree with you 100%. I don't get that either. They don't explain that at all. It's just there. It's like this thing also can manipulate electricity. It blows up lights. It can talk through radios. It can make phone calls. It makes phone calls right from her brain, and it also it can affect pacemakers, kills the guard at the mother's room just by messing with the pacemaker. But they don't utilize that any more than that. And also, it opened the electric lock on the evidence locker, so he can get his ratty leather coat and the dagger back. But I figured they would do more with the electric stuff, uh, but they don't. They that's it. It's just for plot convenience, really. I think you mentioned that before. There's a lot of plot convenience.
Yeah.
The phone call in the interrogation room, which doesn't really throw off the cops because they lock her up anyway. Like even when he called them and taunted them, they still threw her in lockup.
Right. I
Uh,
don't. Yeah, it was
yeah,
just all over the place. And maybe they was like, "Oh, you're an accessory, and it's two of
yeah,
you," but they didn't go out looking for the other one. So
yeah, yeah. They did not. And then when they locked her up, I don't understand what they were doing by the time they locked her up till the time she freaked out and Gabriel emerged. they left the precinct and came back. They didn't come
Mhm.
back with McDonald's or something. They just went somewhere conveniently so that she could murder everyone and then came back just in time to fight her off.
Well, it was another town crime because they are the only two cops in Seattle.
Yes, there. Well, everyone else was getting murdered. Everyone else was in this police station, and even the CSI chick, she was dialing 911. She's like, "Oh, why am I calling 911?" I'm like, "Are you the only police station in Seattle? There are other cops. Go to a radio and go, holy shit, everybody's dead here at the 93rd precinct. Like, send everybody else. Even Moss went send the National Guard, which I was like, okay, that's a little funny, but not really. Like, you're a professional, but okay.
It was so
Um,
long.
yeah, and then we don't see them again either. We don't
Uh-uh.
get closure on them. Once Gabriel hits them with the chair, Moss is never seen again. She just collapses on the floor. The CSI chick says, "Oh, I'll stay with her till the paramedics get here." Is she dead? We don't know. Then Shaw goes to the hospital. He gets the dagger put through him, and he falls on the floor. We never see him again.
Nope.
There's no closure to those characters. He doesn't hobble in the room. Normally they do those things in the horror movies. When somebody's alive, they'll emerge at the end. Like, he would come in, maybe pull the dagger out because he's a man. Pull the dagger out, oh, and then hold it, and it's like, and make a joke like, "I thought this was a hospital. Where the doctor?" No, we don't get anything. The movie just ends with the horror trope, with the lights being manipulated. It's like, oh, Gabriel's still there. Ooh. Ah.
Yeah, it was bad. It was. They tried. I will give him this. He thought outside the box, but he was all the way outside the box and into another box because it was a lot.
It was a lot, and
Yeah, it was.
I don't recommend that for everybody. But if anyone's curious to see where probably the influences for this movie came from,
Hmm.
look for a movie called Basket Case. It was from the 70s, the mid 70s. I think it's a David Cronenberg movie, one of his early ones. Um, because it does the conjoined twin thing. The thing with and look up Raising Cain.
Yes.
Raising Cain was an 80s movie. Same thing with a personality disorder. And I don't have to tell you, most people listening to this probably know Fight Club.
Yes.
Um, and Fight Club's a good movie. Um, watch that. The same thing with personality disorder, but the idea of the other personality being projected outside the body, and they think they're still moving around and doing normal things, while their physical body is actually in control of the other personality and doing something else. And it's interesting how Fincher did it. Some of it didn't make sense because it's like, how do you know what's happening in this room when your body's in the other room? I don't know. Like, it was like that weird stuff, but I ignored that with Fight Club. It was good. They tried to do it in this movie, but it's weird, and then some
Hmm.
of it didn't make sense. So
No, no, it did
yeah,
not because
yeah,
they're looking at her and she's there and the killer
yeah,
is off killing.
yeah.
It was confusing. But yeah, but we do know that he's able to change her vision, which I guess would be a superpower because he's able to project what he wants to her.
Right. I mean, and that didn't make sense either, because if he's making her think she's doing her laundry, why would you then fade it into, oh, I'm going to show you my horrible murder? Like, wait, but then why wouldn't you just show her that the whole time? Like, that does it made no sense. Or unless they were saying, like, and they weren't clear on this, and that's why we're confused,
Hmm.
that somehow his mental hold over her wasn't that strong, and that she would see the
Yeah.
murders because, I guess, when in the heat of the moment when the murder was happening, and it was also plot convenience too, because she didn't see it through his eyes. She didn't see herself stabbing the doctors or any of that. She saw it like she was in the room somewhere else
Right.
watching it happen, which is also bizarre. Yeah, and it was just very convenient, um and very awkward, and they don't Explain it. It's as mysterious as his electrical powers. It makes no sense.
I don't know. Part of the brain we haven't tapped into. We don't use all our 100% brain. So
Right, but that would have been also interesting if they made a point of that. If they were like, "Oh, she's tapped into some if hyper evolved part of the brain that we don't use, and her hypothalamus is running at 120%." I don't give me something. I don't care. Make up some medical shit. I don't care. At least have something in there where it's like, okay, this explains it, and it's like, oh, the electrical activity of her brain is 500% above normal, and that's why it affects radios and can do cellular communication. Okay, all right, whatever. I'll buy it as long as somebody says something. Nothing is said about it. It's just a line in a file and never addressed. It just is.
yes, yes. That was weird. None of it made any sense. Even the part where they was cutting out him from her and the whole thing. The fact of having a parasitic twin is technically not anything that's new. We hear stories about it all the time. Where we're like, oh, I thought I had a tumor, but it was actually my twin.
Yeah,
But the way how they did it, it seemed like it was shrouded in such secrecy. Like I would expect maybe the twin was fighting and was trying to hang on and live, and it didn't. And
yeah,
whatever it was, they just pushed it back in the skull. But yeah, it was way over the top for something that just didn't make any sense at all. But yeah,
yeah.
that's it's kind of everything that I can think of.
Yeah, and I think what makes this movie more painful too, besides like sitting through all this stuff, is like there's there's good ideas in there, and you
Mhm,
could see a better movie in there, and then it hurts. It's like, oh, you didn't do this, or you could have done that, and
mhm.
there's just I don't know. And then some things are just because like the whole thing with after the surgery she gets adopted and Gabriel's still in her head up until her sister's born, and then he's out of the picture for no reason other
Well,
than
maybe
she has a sister, so
yeah.
he literally said, "Oh, you didn't need me anymore." I'm like, wait, so that's your whole existence, is that she needs you, but
Well, see,
you
in a way
yeah,
that would make sense had they just not him go on this random killing spree that doesn't connect to anything.
right.
Because if you have like he's trying to protect her, then this new sister comes along. Okay, you don't need me, and then he reemerges when her husband is beating her to say, "Hey, you need me. What's going on?" That would make sense. But then to just go on this random killing spree,
Yes, the
that
protection aspect was only in the beginning and never brought back. As a
right,
matter of fact, everything after that is detrimental to her,
right.
right? Yeah, even when you get to the hospital thing, it's obvious all he wants to do is live at her expense, right?
Mhm.
Take over her body and all that shit. So it's like, so she doesn't really need you. You need her. So, man. So yeah, again, that's another aspect that's not realized.
Mhm.
And that,
Exactly.
and that was a thing that was also a thing in the basket case movie where the deformed brother was protecting the other one, the normal one,
Mhm.
from people who was harassing him, like the evil landlord and all that stuff. Go kill them. But it's like James Wan took that and never realized it. He just threw it in there in the beginning and then went, I'm over here now, over here in Murderville.
Yeah, this was interesting. I will say this. It was different. But
It
yeah.
was different, but yeah, it wasn't good.
So, any other final thoughts about? I think you kind of said everything that needed to be said.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think I mean don't watch this movie. Right? I would say that like don't I mean it's on HBO Max, so if you have even like if you have HBO Max, it's almost 2 hours long and
Hmm.
there's no payoff. So it's like don't it's not worth it. I mean, even if it was like free, I'd be like
It's free.
yeah.
Watch What If instead.
Yeah, I mean I had a better time with that. Uh, and I mean, if you want to talk about emotional impact, this movie also lacks any of that. You don't really have emotional impact. You're not invested in most of the characters.
Mhm.
The only likable one is the CSI girl, and I guess Shaw's likable. He's a kind of aloof detective, but he's likable. Madison is weird, the main character, because she doesn't feel anything. Husband's dead. She's like, meh. Uh, you know, just had your
Babies.
third
Meh.
miscarriage. Meh. Uh, oh, you found your birth mother. Meh. It's like she just doesn't like react to anything. She just has the one tone through the whole movie, and it's like that's fucking weird. It's like you think you'd be like she only reacts afraid. Her two emotions are no emotion and scared. That was pretty much it.
I could see that absolutely. Yeah. So that was our thoughts on *Malignant*. Not a great movie. Do you have anything you would like to plug, Mr. Seeley?
Yeah, so you can catch Tony, Carlos, myself, Ryan, Brett, Manny on Throwdown. So this week we're doing it on Mondays. Usually we do throw down your questions Sunday, but we'll be doing it uh, next Monday, and every other time it's Thursday and Sundays. So check us out there.
Wonderful. And you can catch more reviews and previews and video games. We just covered the PlayStation Showcase. We'll cover more video games over at thecoalition.com, with a coalition with a K, on our YouTube page, over on the website, and whatever we can get on Twitch, we'll have on Twitch as well. So thank you so much for joining us. Um, we have a great day, morning, afternoon, evening, and see you guys later.
Yep. See you.